Hello, Robs. We're back with Billy Shakespeare by Weeder, Bally Beatty, William Peter Blatty. Drawings by Victoria Chess. We start with tape 2, which is in reality chapter 2. I go to my backup book so I don't ruin my better copies. Tape 2. Someone entered the room last night, and it was clearly not a messenger. It was the man in the portrait. He stood framed in the doorway just as I was fading, a sullen, sleepy-eyed brute. He wore blue and white striped pajamas and an Arden green beret. I couldn't see much of his face beneath that rank and wild growth of black beard, but the nose put me very much in mind of Savonarola on his more manic days. Speaking of arsonists, could it be the beard who was responsible for the noisome stink of cigar smoke in here? I think he saw me. Let us hope this does not lead to further interruptions. But enough of small beer. 'Tis again the very witching time of night, when churchyards moan, etc., etc. Where were we? Never mind, ass. It was a rhetorical question. I know where we were. In the wasteland of your snide conjectures. So my father was a greasy butcher, eh? And it offends you, does it? That one of the masses could have written Lear Macbeth et al. Yes, it offends you. I can see that it offends you. So you had to ring in nobles and university snots. Do me a favor, would you? Let me hear you say, sweet lady, ho-ho. Excellent. You were born for the part. And your opinions put me in mind of a certain Marx, Mr. Marx, over on the other side, who has been peddling some twaddlesome theories about the capitalist mentality that at one time struck me as being false as Dicer's oaths, but which I now find frabjiously appropriate. I wish I could find him. But when he last approached me with a handful of tracts, I fobbed him off on a certain Mr. Caligula and haven't seen him since. I trust they are getting along. And how are you getting along? Enjoying this little seance, are you? Taking notes, eh? You vacant-eyed cretins, you overweening dolts. Well, set you down this. Will Shakespeare's father was not a butcher, but a glover. His stall was set up in the paved market square of Stratford, and my God, he had to beat the customers off with the jawbone of a Marlowe. He traveled in gloves, not ham hocks or chitlings. Gloves! Oh, that I were a glove. Upon that hand I might touch that cheek. Get the connection now? I tossed in that line for Pater. Know what he said when he read it? Romeo and Juliet? He said the nurse was real good, but I didn't get the jokes. He also said, you get money, much money for this? And when I told him I got £3 for the rights, he gave me a box on the ear and advised me to wipe off the grease paint and get home and help me with the business like your brother. My father, the critic, as for my mother, the Puritan, she wouldn't even read it. Whenever I brought up the subject, she would simply glare at me and say, death and damnation. I could never think of a topper. But isn't that a hell of a thing for a mother to tell her son? My father at least tried. In fact, there was one play he liked, Titus Andronicus, that part where the girl holds a pot with the stumps of her hands and catches the blood from the men who raped her, and then Titus serves them up in a pie for her to eat. That part was real good, he would say. But as to my other plays, all he ever said was, well, if that's what the people want. He thought King Lear was silly. Well, de gustibus non est disputandium, etc. Meanwhile, don't think you're getting away with anything. Clearly, my father was not an illiterate. He did read the play. I always put the emphasis on the wrong damn word. He did read the plays, didn't he? Do not mock. And butcher me no butchers. My father, dummy, became a landed gentleman and mayor of Stratford. That's right, mayor. And the crown granted him a coat of arms. What a beauty, that coat of arms. a gold shield with a band of black across it that bore a spear of gold tipped with silver, and for a crest, a silver falcon with outstretched wings brooding on a silver wreath, and supporting a spear. Eat your heart out, Marlowe. Ha! You think my father was illiterate? Marlowe's father signed his will with an X. Yes, an X. I have a design in mind for a Marlowe coat of arms. Twin Tamberlins crossed in the form of an X rampant against a field of plagiarized text. How about a motto? How about fight fiercely, Cambridge? I like it. Now about my schooling, Toads. There now, I've offended you. God love you. You are all God's creatures, and not to be blamed for your condition. There, leave off wringing of the hands. We cannot all be me. You are wanted. You are needed. Without Toads, we would be overrun by flies. School. Stratford had a free grammar school, which I attended every weekday, summer and winter, from the time I was 7 until I turned 14. I'd beetle down Henley Street, execute an Immelmem at the Market Cross, scream, "Who is Sylvia?" at Dawes, the town baker. He was having a thing with Mistress Sylvia Leek, barmaid at the Raging Gullet, and my screaming gave him fits, and then walked 2 long blocks to the Guild building. That was school, a room upstairs over the council room, one of the best in all of England, my dears. Our masters were top, utterly top, and for good reason. Stratford paid its teachers £20 per a double the average for even larger towns. Plush, and all Oxford graduates, class all the way. At Stratford we had none of your look, Duncan, see the dagger, see the pretty dagger fiascos. We were expected to have mastered our native tongue prior to entering school, and the manner in which we mastered it has been the cynosure of heated, if not abusive, discussions twixt myself and the sun-dappled shade of one of your senile lady teachers from the Los Angeles school system in the New World. I told her what a horn book was, a slab of wood on which a page full of letters had been fastened and covered over with a thin, transparent sheet of horn to protect it from our grubby little paws. Then I explained how we had this crazy idea that if you learned the sounds of the individual letters, you could put together the sound of a word, and I wish you could have heard her. Incidentally, what is a communist? She went on about this for a while, and then she called me a dirty old man and a hack in bard's clothing. She also threatened to foster a cult, ascribing the authorship of my plays to Sir Francis Drake. Wouldn't the old 710 split love that, though? Wouldn't he adore it? Why, he might even believe it. That lace hanky martinet. Were it not for the storm that crippled the Spanish Armada, he would have gone down in the records as an even more colossal ass than the one who ordered the charge of the Light Brigade. A swelling ocean teeming with enemy dreadnoughts. And what is our first line of defense doing? Bowling, cause, bowling. Of course, why not? Enjoy. I should have written a play about it. Ah, what heroic speeches for the actor who played Drake, This day is called the Feast of St. Gutterball, etc., etc. It stuns the imagination. Well, too late now. Meanwhile, I have introduced the schoolteacher to G.B. Shaw. There's another one, Shaw. The bearded sneak. He fancies himself a greater playwright than I and doesn't hesitate to say it. In fact, he doesn't hesitate to say much of anything, but I handle him, all right. I handle him. Whenever I see him, I assume an antic disposition, cross my eyes, draw my jaw moronically, and drone, "Tell me again about the alphabet, George." And no matter what he says after that, all I say is "garn." It drives him mad, utterly mad. He was absolutely insufferable right after the musical business. I'd say "garn," and he'd sing "The rain in Spain stays mainly in the plain" at the top of his lungs, and there was nothing for it then but to jerk his whiskers and run like the wind. But what a cross to bear, Thank heaven for West Side Story. I was waiting for a reaction. Sacrilege, Well, you are listening to the source, the fountainhead. The horse's mouth, I am entitled. And listen, children, Hamlet depicted events occurring in 9th century Denmark, but you don't think I was demented or arty enough to write the dialogue in 9th century Danish, do you? Wait a minute. You just might. I'd better make it clear. I wrote it in 17th century English. Can you guess why? I'll give you a hint. My audiences were comprised of 17th century Englishmen. Yes, true. I've always been funny that way. I tried to write in a language that was immediate and vital to my audiences. Why do you suppose I studied for months with Jimmy before coming over here? Because I adore the sound of mumbling. Eh? You are utterly wet, and goody gumdrops for West Side Story. Prithee, wouldst thou? Is not for you. I wrote that way. Yes, but for God's sake, that's the way we talked. Not the way you talk. Not unless you're a pansy, are you? I favor adaptations, did a great deal of adapting myself. King Lear, for example, I merely updated it from an earlier play. Yes, and now are you ready for it? Can you stand it? The original version was a musical comedy with a happy ending. Be my guest. Vomit. West Side Story. Jimmy saw it. He travels quite freely between your plane and ours. It's taken me years to find the gimmick, but he was able to master it almost the day after he got here. Said he felt some sort of pull that yanked him back. Teenage voices screaming for him. I've never heard them, but I must see to it that Jimmy meets Joan. Meanwhile, sharks and jets, eh? Splendid. A good play is a vital organism. It grows, it adapts to new environments, new milieus of the human predicament. Motion pictures? Glorious. Wish I'd had them. Imagine what I could have done with Lear and the storm on the heath. Panavision? Stereophonic effects. Zoom lenses? Oh, you completely round the bend. It would have been a gas. What? Only the words were important. We preferred to let our imaginations work rather than use scenery. Incredible shrinking, man. I love you. Really, I love you. You're so dumb, you're adorable. In my day, we went to the theater for excitement, dummy, and we used every special effect in the book. We had killings and maimings on stage that would have kept you awake nights screaming. And as realistic as we could make it, blood? The stage was drowned, and none of your damn vegetable coloring either. When we had blood, it was blood. We even made a study and discovered that sheep's blood was better for our bleeding effects than ox blood because it ran more freely. God, how I love stunning you with this. Listen, remember that scene in Marlowe's Tamburlaine where the governor of Babylon is hung in chains and shot by the besiegers? One night when the admiral's company was doing it, a bullet went wild and killed a pregnant woman in the audience. Pretty powerful imaginations we had in those days, eh? Eh? My horn book. I loved that horn book. I don't know which I love more, that or my lucky stone. I think the stone. Whenever Brother Gil got out of line, I would bash him with it. Know something? It does look like sheep's blood. My horn book was fun, too. Near the market cross in Stratford, there used to be a square wooden structure on pillars supporting the town clock, and encircling it was a ledge from which I was to dangle my legs comfortably and watch my father, the patron of the arts, swindling the connies below me at his glove stall. I'd bring my horn book with me, never could study in solitude. Never could write in a calm atmosphere either. Always in a tavern, a kitchen, a hall, a front parlor. At the market cross, I was drenched in marvelous buzzing, swirling sounds. The hurly-burly cries of the buyers and sellers, and what a glorious vantage point for studying character. Character. I was always very strong on that. Well, wouldn't you know? No, you wouldn't, you pathetic boobs. Boobs. That's the way I spelled it on my own book. I spelled it often. Also words that I made up and used later in my plays, like hornerific, bilitudinous, love's labor's lost, 1594. Know what the word means? Hornerific, bilitudinous, I can't read that. It doesn't mean a damn thing. Some prating ass once called it an anagram for high ludi f bacanus nati tuiti orbi, which he claims is Arabic for these plays, the offspring of F. Bacon, are preserved for the world. Keep smirking. Swine. It is also an anagram for F. Bacon reads Ovid in the bathroom. Ha! Know what we did with anagrams in my day? We burned them at the stake for witches and bloody good riddance. Whoa. Litty Latin, eh? I could kill Benny for that one. Well, Halloween, my little Sandman. At Stratford School, Latin was all we studied. Yes, Cicero, Ovid, Virgil, Livy, Quintilian, the lot. The sole purpose of school then was running out clerks for church physicians, not water skiers for Surfside 6. And except for the Bible, the Book of Common Prayer, and some Greek, Latin, was it? Latin, day in, day out, until I bled supines and ablative absolutes all over my buckram shoes. And talk about dreary. Except for Ovid, of course. He was our Henry Miller. I drew upon him for my Venus and Adonis, which was rather a flaming success with the younger crowd. Know what I mean? SEX. I made only one mistake. I should have called it Tropic of Venus, and please, no pious platitudes about art. In my day, art was not edible. I can see myself bursting in on my producer shouting, "Dick, I've got a great piece of art for the Saturday matinee." He would have broken both my legs and used me as an extra in the next battle sequence. Honestly, are you out of your minds? Blood, lust, murder, rape, gougings, incest, sex, war. That's what you told the producer, and you always gave him the billing before you even wrote the play. Like, thrill to giant spectacle as the king with the charmed life, battles the incredible creeping forest, thrills, Macbeth. Enough of that. Why do you keep digressing? Weren't we speaking of my education? Hey, never mind Latin. You reply, what about the extensive knowledge of geography, history, etc., implicit in your plays? Whoever wrote them must certainly have been university trained and well traveled, and you, pathetic William, fit in neither of those categories. Of course, right, I agree. Whoever wrote The Winter's Tale knew his geography like the wart on the tip of his nose. That's why some of the action takes place in a sea-coast town in Bohemia, when there wasn't even a pond within 100 miles of Bohemia. Marlowe de Magellan, Balboa, Bacon, sure. A warlock at history as well, eh? Why not? That's why in Henry VI, Talbot's death precedes the capture of Joan of Arc, whereas in fact Talbot died 22 years after Joan's death. Try dramatic license. Go ahead. Try it, you anagramming apes. Incidentally, do you see yon cloud in shape of a camel? My plays, mine, are fraught with errors of both time and place and contain far less erudition than the works of almost any of my contemporaries. Who knew history? Who knew law? All I ever studied was Latin, for God's sake. If I couldn't decline it, I didn't know it. But you know everything, don't you, Smerdakov? Do you also know that the Venice in my Merchant doesn't even vaguely resemble the Venice of my day? And how about all that crying and shrying over Shylock's usury? Do you jest? Usury was not only a commonplace in Venice, it was applauded. Yes, now they tell me. I must have missed that somehow in my travels to Venice. I must have been absent that day, or lying drugged in a gondola with a Venetian doxy. Dismal gleeks. God, how I pity you. But listen now, boys. Maybe we've got something in Shylock. Mayhap we can attribute him to our globe-trotting dum-dum mystery playwright. Imbeciles, is that your idea of a Jew? That ridiculous caricature, that scurrilous folk myth? Heaven heal your kidneys. Shylock is obviously the creation of a man who knew only the myths, who never saw a Jew, who never left England, for Jews were exiled from England during the Middle Ages, and when I was writing the law was still in full force. Bacon couldn't have limned so unreal a portrait as Shylock. It could only have been done by a stay-at-home like me. Me. There are some gentlemen in white sheets over on the other side who are rather fond of Shylock. They are now and then given to oozing up to me for a fond patting of my receding hairline. They don't seem to know much about Othello, however, but if you think I'm going to fill them in, you're crazier than Lear in his underwear. I'm planning another of my famous introductions, though, the instant Jomo Kenyatta gets here. I do hope he brings some more of those nice Mau gentlemen with him. Speaking of bigots, guess who's the idol of the Night Riders over here? Yes, Fraternity King Marlowe. Talk about Shylock. Ever read a play by Marlowe called The Rose? It is the worst. The Mark. Stirrings in the neighbor room. Ain't on. And we shall return with tape 3 at another time. Goodbye, bruv. Good boy.